Hey guys, I'm the Great Jedi and welcome back to the channel for another Star Wars news update video in which I share with you guys all the information and research I've gathered in regards to the new upcoming Star Wars open world game, Star Wars Outlaws, and talk about everything we know up to this point, including small details to even bigger pieces of information found in interviews. And as always, all of these sources are concrete and linked in the description for those that want to check them out. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So to start us off, Star Wars Outlaws is the very first open world Star Wars game, and it's created by Ubisoft Massive Entertainment and Lucasfilm Games. And they're planning to release this game sometime in 2024, and they've already released a cinematic and gameplay trailer that is on the channel if you haven't got to check it out yet. The links are in the description. I'd highly recommend checking them out. And with that, they also announced that this game will take place between Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and will only be on next-gen consoles, including the Xbox Series X and S, the PlayStation 5, and PC. Now, in this game, you'll be able to step into the role of Kay Vess, who is a clever scoundrel that takes her first step in the galactic underworld. And a big part of the story is to attempt one of the biggest heists the Outer Rim has ever seen, in which you'll have to fight, steal, and outwit your way through the galaxy's crime syndicates as you join the galaxy's most wanted, all in an effort to start a new life along with her companion Nyx and a trench coat wearing BX commando droid. Now, I actually find this story very doable and intriguing, but at the same time this character does sound pretty contradictory in terms of lore, and I'm not trying to dive my head deep down in the story's lore because we all know there's going to be problems since it's canon and given their track record, but just in terms of sense making, they lose me a little bit, especially if this is in such a short time frame, which we know it is because it's in between episodes 5 and 6. And for them to say that this is Kay's first step into the underworld and we're experiencing that alongside her, which seems great from a gameplay perspective, which I want them to put first, but I would also like a story that makes sense. And when asked about how this character is different than, let's say, Han Solo, which even he is a little bit of a stretch to pull something off that big, they basically said that the main difference is experience, and that Kay hasn't made her mark on the galaxy. She doesn't know all these syndicates and criminal organizations, and the fact that she's still figuring it all out really doesn't give me a lot of confidence that she has the skill to pull off one of the biggest heists in the Outer Rim. I mean, that's not an easy job. Although I will say that they didn't confirm the ending, if whether or not she's going to pull it off or not, because in all fairness, they said that she attempts one of the biggest heists in the Outer Rim. So she may not be able to pull it off, which I feel like is more realistic, but given their track records, I believe they want this Kay character to be successful and to make a name for herself, and that she's actually going to pull it off. But that's just my 2 cents. Now, it's also confirmed that both Kay and Nyx will be able to explore sprawling landscapes of Star Wars locations, both old and new, where no two worlds are the same and are very different from one another, and we actually get more of a glimpse of that in the gameplay trailer. Like, we see new planets that we haven't seen before, but we also see locations like Tatooine, Kijimi, and even possibly Coruscant. And speaking of things we've seen before, in an interview with GameSpot and the game director Matthias Carlson and the narrative director Navid Kavari, they were asked and told if it's confirmed that classic planets and characters will make cameos, which is news to me, and they just asked the developers this question, but led the beginning part as it's a fact. Now, we already knew about the classic planets being confirmed, but I had no idea about cameos. Like, I saw cameos in the cinematic trailer, but nothing in the gameplay portion, and you can't really go off of the cinematic portion as confirmation. That's more along the lines of the concept. But the developers didn't deny that statement and continued to answer the question in an agreeing way, so I guess cameos are going to be in the game, which I think could actually be really cool depending on how it's implemented. Otherwise, if it isn't confirmed, I don't see why these developers wouldn't start answering the question by saying no, cameos aren't confirmed, to set those expectations straight, and then just continue with their response. Anything otherwise would just feel misleading. Although in another interview, he also brings up Jabba the Hutt, so once again, if it's not confirmed, I'm not really sure why he would mention him. Now, they were also asked why they set the story between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and what about that time period gives you the ability to tell the story that you couldn't tell at any other point in time. And they responded by saying that during this time, the Empire is in control, and the criminal organizations and syndicates are finding their space to rise up. This time frame means that Kay will deal with familiar factions like the Pike Syndicate and the Hutt Cartel, and a new organization called the Ashiga Clan. Now, with this being an open world game, Kay will be able to race across the humid jungles of Akiva and the windswept savanna of Tashara on her speeder, then jump into the pilot seat of her ship, known as the Trailblazer, to travel other parts of the galaxy. From dogfights to high-risk, high-reward missions from crime syndicates, the choices Kay makes can influence her ever-changing reputation, hence the wanted system, which we'll talk more about here in just a minute. And when Kay and Nyx find themselves in a sticky situation, she'll have her trusty blaster, can employ stealth and gadgets, or wait for the right moment to distract enemies. Which, to be honest, all sounds like fun. I actually like the fact that you can choose between stealth or going loud, and when it comes to the companion Nyx, it really does remind me a lot of BD1 in the Star Wars Jedi franchise, but in this case, I like the fact that they're adding gameplay options. You can have it attack, distract, or open other opportunities where that's impacting the environment, or even gathering weapons for you, which I have no doubt will help further the gameplay experience if executed properly, because Star Wars Jedi Survivor started to actually add some gameplay features to BD1 that weren't there in Fallen Order, and it added so much more depth and purpose to the gameplay, and even having them to begin with. And another thing I like about the gameplay is the fact that you can have different abilities with certain guns. Like right here in the gameplay, when up against someone with a shield, we can see that she has the option to stay with the blaster, or switch modes to a stun, or even switch to some type of special focus shot. And another thing we can see is the fact that there's going to be some weapon variety, because we get to see her use a couple of different blasters, which seem to be unique. Their fire rate was different, as well as how they were operated. Some weapons will overheat like her first one, and then the one that Nyx brought her had ammo. Now, in regards to the ground vehicle gameplay, we can see that Kay has some sort of combat that she can use while on her speeder, but I'm curious on how many options will we really have. Do we only have that one move, or will there be more? I don't know. I haven't really seen the developers touch on this other than them saying that there's combat, but I don't know if it's limited to that slow motion move, which I guess is called the trick shot. And I actually quote them when they say, it gives the player a moment where they can really hit something precisely that feels both incredibly lucky and spectacular. Because I don't know about you guys, but to me personally, that move is something, but I would still prefer some combat that doesn't slow everything down, especially if they wanted us to have that feeling where if we hit something precisely, that feels both incredibly lucky and spectacular. Because, like I said, I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't get that feeling since everything is slowed down. In fact, I would have the opposite. I would have that feeling if I can land a really good precise shot while keeping that fast-paced action going. That would make me feel lucky and spectacular. Like, think about it. What will be more common, the harder move or the easy one? Obviously the harder one. So personally, I would like to be able to shoot how we normally do in game, but still while on the speeder. I think that would be really cool. But overall, I do think that the overall gameplay has a good start and is definitely AAA worthy from the looks of it. And I know I shouldn't compare everything, and please don't get me wrong, the game does look good and we've only seen a tiny little glimpse of it, but I couldn't help but notice that little bits and pieces seemed more on the clunkier side in comparison to Battlefront 2, which is a multiplayer experience that isn't just primarily blaster and starfighter focused when it comes to the combat like this game seems to be. And I just feel like it's going to be a single player open world Star Wars experience with the vast majority of the combat being blaster, because they wanted the smuggler take rather than a Jedi experience with a lightsaber or the Force, which I'm all for, but that's their choice, and the gunplay needs to feel really good. And when it appears that Han Solo's DL-44 blaster gameplay looks better than the open world game, whose main character's main weapon is going to be a blaster, it's a little concerning. Not only that, but I can say the same thing in regards to the starfighter combat and comparing that to Battlefront 2. Once again, think about why I'm comparing this to Battlefront 2 though, and not Squadrons. It wouldn't be fair for me to compare the starfighter dogfight section of the game to a game that's primarily focused on starfighters like squadrons. But that's the point I'm actually trying to make with Battlefront 2 and Outlaws. You would expect for squadrons to have a more in-depth, fun gameplay experience when it comes to starfighters compared to Battlefront 2, and it should be the same thing with Outlaws, but with the blaster gameplay, and frankly even the starfighter gameplay in comparison to Battlefront 2. Especially when the developers have mentioned that flying around in space and dogfighting is going to be a big part of the game, and one of the things that sets them apart, but to me, it doesn't even look as good as Battlefront 2. And once again, if that's a primary focus, it needs to be fun and smooth. Now, also keep in mind, I'm saying looks and not how it feels, so I can completely be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but looks is all we have to go off of right now, and these are my first impressions given all the information that we have been given. And if I'm not wrong, then they have time to fix it. The game isn't even supposed to come out until next year, and if they need to delay it for a better gameplay experience, I'm all for it, and I'm really sure that most people would be understanding, especially since this game will be the first in its space, so it's good to set the bar high. But Gray, they're two companies! And yes, I do understand that it's a different company working on the game in comparison to EA's Battlefront 2, and that it's also on a different engine, but my point still stands. Just like you would expect Star Wars Squadrons Starfighter gameplay to be better, more fun, and more in-depth than Battlefront 2 Starfighter Assault. It's the same concept. Also, what's with this camera movement? It seems a bit weird to me, but I'm also thinking that that's more of a player choice rather than how it is naturally. Like, it looks as if the camera sensitivity is super slow and the person is just moving it in a weird way, which I don't know why they would want to showcase it like that, but that's just more of a nitpick that I only noticed a couple times throughout the entire 10-minute gameplay showcase that I thought was still worth mentioning. Now, another cool thing about this game that you may have noticed in the gameplay trailer is that there are specific points in the game where you get to make a choice. And one question that I've had was, will these choices actually impact the game in such a way that the game has different outcomes? I personally don't think that's how deep it's going to go, but it would be a nice addition for the game to add some replayability. Although what they did say about this is that the reputation is tied to decision making and will have an impact in the game, such as some crime syndicates hunting you if you're on bad terms, or getting contracts and better prices on things if you're on good terms. They also mentioned some examples like being able to steal from one of the syndicates to pay another, and on this note, the game director goes on to say that one of the mantras that Massive held onto throughout development was the idea that you live and die by your reputation. It is core to the Star Wars Outlaws fantasy. From what I have seen on the system, action prompts a reaction. Get caught stealing valuable items from a Pike scavenger station, your universal reputation with the faction will decrease. Decide against bribing an Imperial officer, and it won't be long before you're flagged as a problem worthy of the Empire's attention. The reputation system really allows you as a player to craft your own matrix of relationships with the criminal syndicates. And we also see this in action in the gameplay trailer, and it seems pretty cool. And I really like the fact that they're expanding with some more details here. Like, he goes on to say all the missions that you complete and the decisions that you make will play into that. It allows you to build different relationships with factions like the Hutts or the Pikes. Push too far in one direction with any given faction, your reputation will impact your opportunities, your visibility, and your perspective on the story. If you become entangled with the Empire, you may become a wanted fugitive, as demanding of Imperial attention as the Last Jedi. The Empire are our space cops, so how do you usually get away from a wanted level in other types of games? You could lay low and wait until the heat goes down so that you're not wanted anymore, or you can get rid of the problem. If there are 3 Imperials, you can get rid of 3 Imperials. However, it won't always be that easy. Let's say that you're discovered sneaking through an Empire compound. That's going to be a difficult situation to get out of. There are lots of situations within the overall open world structure of Outlaws that will allow you to deal with these situations and systems in very different ways. You can blast into hyperspace and try to escape into another star system, ride out into the open world against those who give chase, or try your hand at fending off increasingly challenging levels of resistance. The threat of becoming wanted is ever present and will need to be factored in when dealing with the Galactic Empire and the corrupt officers in its ranks who stalk the criminal underworld. Another example of how your choices will impact the game and reputation is like in the gameplay trailer when we're in the chop shop. If we didn't get caught and go out fighting, the reputation wouldn't have gone down. And if we chose to bribe that officer, we wouldn't have been wanted and hunted down when leaving the cantina. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that wand reputation system sounds like a lot of fun if implemented correctly. Now, another thing we do see in the gameplay trailer is a workbench, and GameSpot actually asked them how much crafting or survival elements going to factor into Outlaws, and they said that in both core narrative campaign experience and in the side adventures that you go on your own accord, growing in various ways is a core part of the game. You upgrade your ship, your speeder, and your abilities. They also go on to say that you will see her grow into her kit and blaster, adding new modules and elements to that. Now, the next thing we see is the space travel, in which we can see that we can use the hyperdrive to go into lightspeed to travel, and the ship contains weapons such as rockets, guns, and even a self-repair tool. And they are expressing that this is a big part of the game that includes risky space combat, dogfighting to large-scale capital ship opportunities, have things like contracts, smuggling, pirates, being free to go wherever you want, and even the ability to seamlessly travel from ground to space, and it appears that we may have got a good look at that in action. But to be honest, I'm not really sold on that last one yet, and let me explain. They said it's seamless ground to space combat, but not just ground to space combat. Why? I think it's because what they showed in the gameplay trailer is possibly all that you can do with it being seamless. Like, real ground to space is being able to hop on your ship and having control over it around the planet, and then if you want to go up into space, you can go up into space. And from the gameplay trailer, it seems to just have a seamless transition from ground to space, which is something I would like to argue is not actually ground to space. That's why I feel like they said it's seamless ground to space, meaning that you don't actually see a loading screen from the ground to going into space. But who cares? That's almost the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's a loading screen, a cutscene, or whatever they showed us with invisible walls and having no freedom. Because I mean, what's the point if there's invisible walls that don't let you turn left or right or go back down to the surface? Now, I hope I'm wrong, but I really don't think that's the case. Otherwise, I feel like they would have said something or shown something. Not only that, if that was the case and I am wrong, I doubt that the ship would be on a landing platform like that. Now, I could be wrong on this as well, but I feel like it would be more likely if it's just a seamless transition rather than you actually being able to control your flight. If there was going to be ground to space where you could fly your ship on that planet, it probably wouldn't be designed like that and would most likely be able to land it almost anywhere. Like, I don't really understand the big deal and selling point of the seamless ground to space if you don't have full control of your ship. Like I said, who cares if it's seamless ground to space? That's the same thing as a cutscene. It comes down to the same thing if you can't turn around or do anything. Like, the whole point of having ground to space is to maintain control, to feel that you can go anywhere at any point without the need of a cutscene. And I feel like they know this because that's why they said they wanted this experience to include being able to walk into a cantina, do a job, hop in your ship, go into lightspeed, and go to another planet or something along those lines. Now, in regards to some of the last shots in the gameplay trailer, we see lots of old and new locations, which is awesome, but one of my concerns was there going to be enough stuff to do, or are the worlds just going to be empty? Well, they actually responded and made very clear that they're not just empty, beautiful worlds, but the pillars of the game include new adventures, unique challenges, enticing rewards, and are filled with dense cities and cantinas that are filled with criminals for opportunities and missions, with larger parts of the open world for immersion. And in the gameplay trailer, we actually get to see some sort of credit system, so that may or may not be tied to the opportunities and jobs that you can do, and possibly even the crafting system to buy new parts and stuff. Now, another cool thing about the maps is that they're not auto-generated, and that each map had lots of hard work put into it, and is uniquely crafted to bring different gameplay to the table. And because of that, there's not as many planets, which, to be honest, I'd prefer, because I'd rather have less planets with more things to do on them, where it's individually crafted for gameplay, rather than lots of planets with little to do on them. And one way they explained the difference in gameplay was that on one of their maps known as Tashara, there's a speeder, but on another map, you can actually become a thief working behind the scenes. And another thing is that just because there's not as many planets in the game, that doesn't mean that it's going to be small, because as a size comparison for these maps, Tashara, the one that they showed off in the gameplay trailer, is larger than the Washington DC map in The Division 2, which is also an Ubisoft game. and they said that with the introduction of speeder bikes, we also had to make the map bigger, and as a result it moves faster. So already that one planet is going to be huge. Now that could also mean that's their biggest planet, and be like how Kobo is in Star Wars Jedi Survivor, where that's like their main biggest one. But even if that is the case from what they're saying, it doesn't seem like that's going to be a problem, but time will tell. Now, for our last bit of information, I know some of you guys, including myself, are probably interested in seeing if this open world game is going to be more of a looter shooter or not, and they actually confirmed that it's not, which honestly is something I'd prefer for this type of game. And they were also asked if the game has multiplayer, and they sadly said that it's only single player, which is what I expected, but it would have been a nice addition, especially since their Far Cry open world games had multiplayer. But let me know in the comments down below of what you guys make of all this information with the gameplay trailer and all these interviews. I'm curious to see what you guys think so far with what's been given. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. If you did enjoy it and found it informational and want to stay up to date on all Star Wars Outlaws content, please consider subscribing and liking the video, only if you enjoyed, of course. It's completely free, and you can unsub at any time if you don't like the future content. And if you didn't like the video, that's cool too. Feel free to give the video a dislike, and please leave any constructive criticism in the comments for me on how to make this content better. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.
No.